here with Caroline Swanson, a childhood friend and realtor with Edina Realty. Down which part of the cities do you live in?
So I live in Elk River, but I service almost everywhere.
Everywhere. Okay. So
hmm
you have known me for a really long time.
How long has it been? Like 20 years,
20
19?
years. 20 years. So when I was about 6 years old, if so somewhere around that time, I started going to your mom's daycare down in Rochester, Minnesota.
Yep.
And I felt like I think we have a little bit of a special place in your family's heart because I was over there a little bit extra with staying overnight at your brother and
hmm
um
And I
yeah,
was
I felt
best
like
friends with your sister.
yeah, so it was a fun connection and everything. So you have been kind of all over the Midwest your whole life because you weren't even from Minnesota originally, right?
No, so I was born in Iowa.
You were born in Iowa,
Yep.
and then what
So
brought your parents to Minnesota?
so my dad's job brought us to Minnesota. So he's always worked for Hy-Vee. So he's been floating around in different positions throughout Hy-Vee. Usually a store director is what would take him to and from. So started in Des Moines, got a job as assistant store director out of the Rochester store. So we moved there. We're there for probably 3 years, and then got a store in Olathe, Kansas. So then went to Kansas, lived there for 2 or 3 years, and then bounced back to Iowa for about. I stayed there for about 14 years before I came here too. So then I went to Wisconsin and then to Minnesota. My parents are still in Iowa. So it's all very confusing. But once I graduated college from Iowa State, I went to Eau Claire to follow my husband's job. And then his job brought us here to Maple Grove, Minnesota. And honestly, I think we're here to stay for good.
What an adjustment. I mean, you pretty much know every Midwest stereotype there is out there.
Every single one. I've met everybody.
That's awesome. So what was it? So what kind of is like do you think is the biggest difference between Wisconsin and Minnesota in terms of like just culture?
Between Wisconsin and Minnesota, it's there's a huge cultural difference. It's um I don't know. I liked so many people that I met there. It was an amazing area. We were happy to stay there if Bryce hadn't accepted a job here. But once we moved here, we were like, oh, yeah, this is very familiar to where we've lived before. It's very familiar to the suburbs in Iowa that we were familiar with. We're very, very happy here. Wisconsin is a lot more, where we were in Wisconsin was a lot more nature centric. There's a lot more nature in Minnesota that we have yet to explore. But where we are now, we're thrilled.
Yeah. Are you can you believe it that you went from Iowa to now you're living in the metro area?
Not even a little bit. That's why we decided to be out in Elk River where it's not as city because we're not used to that. Not
Yeah.
at all.
Brought you into real estate.
So I was bartending out of college and it was just a natural transition. There's a joke in real estate that bartending is pre-real estate. Um, it's very similar as far as making your own schedule, making your own success. I don't know. It was a pretty easy move for me. How did you get into real estate?
So worked in sales right out of college, and I enjoyed like the sales aspect. I enjoyed getting to know people. I was not I was just not in love with the product. I sold like copiers and software and things like that.
Oh, sure.
And so when you're not passionate about a project or a product, it's just not, you're there and you're trying to convince somebody like, oh yeah, this is the best and this is going to make your life better. But if you don't buy into that yourself, I mean, that's not passion. You're just kind of fooling yourself and fooling others. So, I
Absolutely.
took a break from it for a while. I kind of another passion of mine is mental health, and so I worked in the mental health field for a while, and I was productive. I was a productive salesman. I was good at it. I just didn't, it wasn't there's a lot of things with sales that are not fun. And if you're not passionate about it and love it and like don't have that drive for something, you're not going to do it for long. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, if you're driving 2 hours, to, I'm up in northern Minnesota, where up on the Iron Range. So I might have to drive into a town of 1,000 people, and trying to convince them why they should buy this software from the cities. And people don't want to do that all the time. So, if you don't think it's the best thing, it's just not wasn't worth it. And so I got into mental health. Um, I really missed sales, and but I really enjoy helping people and like working with people and like relationship building. So some friends of mine bought a brokerage out of all things, bought a brokerage here in town, and I didn't even know them. It was really like a meant to be thing because I didn't even know them well at one point, and I had told them like, I thought about getting my real estate license. I didn't even know at the time that they had their real estate license, let alone they were thinking about buying a brokerage.
Oh,
So,
really?
yeah, so about a year later, they approached me and said, "Hey, we bought this brokerage, or we're thinking about buying this brokerage, but we want you to kind of be our lead salesman." And that's kind of our final part of purchasing this business. And so I said, "Yeah, I'm on board." And so here I am.
Absolutely.
So with you having to move from Wisconsin to Minnesota, I mean, what was it like, doing a job that's so relationally based? Like, what's it like kind of getting back into the swing of things? I mean, you're kind of, I don't want to say starting over, but I mean, are you starting over?
Percent. So
Yeah.
it, for people who are not familiar with how real estate is structured, it's finding your own leads, creating your own relationships. Any business you get is organically yours. So there's not anybody giving you phone numbers to call. Um, so a lot of people create their careers off of their sphere of influence that they have now. And that's what it was when I started in real estate in Wisconsin. I didn't know a lot of people there, so I didn't have any family members to sell to, friends to sell to. I pretty much built my business based off of open houses and other agents trusting me with their leads. So once things got rolling, it was really exciting. We're like, finally, you're in the business, you're good to go. And then my husband was like, hey, let's move to Minnesota, which no complaints here. I absolutely love it here. It just absolutely is starting over. I was like, okay, a new place where I don't know very many people. Let's do this. So we moved. So for context, we had a baby in December, moved in February, and then the pandemic hit right before my license, right before I was supposed to take my
That's
exam.
right. Yeah.
So I got a lot of extra months with my son, which was amazing. Like, I won't ever take that for granted. But I wasn't able to sell here. So I had to do a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, like getting my systems in place, getting any contracts understood, and creating relationships via the internet. I wasn't out networking with people because everybody was at home. So now I'm starting to meet more people. I'm starting to get some actual business, which is
Hmm.
much, it's a big relief because
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
really scary to start in real estate. There's a reason there's such a high failure rate.
Yeah. I I mean, you go into it initially, and I just feel for you with that, because you go into it initially and there's like that fear of having to of having to just jump in and trust that it's going to work out. And then you didn't just do that once, but you had to go to another state and do it again. And plus you had to study and pass another exam, which doing it the first time was like the worst thing ever.
The exam is hard. I remember texting you when I first got my license because you were an agent. And I was like, this was in Wisconsin. I was like, oh, it's not, it's so hard to do. Oh, and it was when I was getting ready for to move to Minnesota. I was like, how is the Minnesota exam? Is it as horrible as everybody says? You're like, no, it's not that bad, but it was that bad.
It
It
was,
wasn't great.
I didn't pass the first time. If that's like a total like disclosure thing, but I didn't pass the first time. I don't know. It's just like, it just seems like it's constantly trying to trick you. It's just not even like, it doesn't even seem like it's relevant. And I mean, now that once you start working into it and everything like that, you'll go back on your like exam and be like, oh yeah, it's nice to know. And sometimes I reference my books, in terms of, you know, oh yeah, this has a septic. How would it? that deal with.
Seriously.
Yeah. So when you were in Wisconsin, were you in more of like a rural area there, or was it a town, a city?
Both.
Okay. So
um
did you deal with septics and like things like that?
for sure. Do you do a lot of that, right?
I'd say like probably 60 to 70%. I mean, unless I sell something right in town, but 60 to 70% of my sales or my listings have a septic of some kind. So
Wow.
that's a horrid deal. Yeah. Um, so I don't know. Is that I mean, I suppose you run into that much in the cities?
Yeah, so actually my very first Minnesota transaction was well and septic, and I was surprised. I was like, oh, I mean, you don't see a lot of that here, but when you're out selling in the suburbs, you see a little bit more. But yeah, I would say one in every four transactions in Wisconsin was well and septic.
And, you know, just kind of talking to home buyers and everything like that's really something to like it can be a huge hindrance to a deal, and a huge hindrance for like
Mhm.
anybody for the home buyer process because you're trying to get this deal done and you're trying to buy your home. And if you're looking for like an FHA or a VA loan, unless something's changed that I'm unaware, I mean, you have to have that compliant. And so we have like old farmhouses, that were built in 1952 up here. It'll have beautiful land or beautiful, nice old house, and then the septic isn't compliant, and that's, in Minnesota, it's a nightmare because you have to dig it up, and this happens all year long, and we only have 2.5 weeks where we don't have snow. It's a frustration as a real estate agent, a frustration as a home buyer, where they just want to buy a home and all these septics are compliant, work, just fine, but they don't have that certificate of, the certificate of compliance, and
Absolutely.
just a nightmare. But
Seriously.
it's a
You,
ten to $15,000 thing. So
yeah. Do you guys have well and septic out where you?
uh, that when I bought my house, I was not an agent at the time. So shout out to Jeff Dick. He he really helped to he really kind of inspired me in like how kind of real estate agent I wanted to be. Um, I wanted to we weren't even pre-approved when before we started looking for houses. So he walked us through that process. We had a huge, I can't even think what it's called right now. When the city taxes you for new streets or something, why can't I think of that?
Special assessment?
We had a special assessment in our house because they switched over. That's right. You just went through the course. You should know.
That
um,
was like 9 months ago.
yeah, I know. You're just better real estate agent than me. Um, we had a special assessment for switch over from septic to city, and the way he walked us through that, we didn't even know much about like these special assessments. We didn't like know anything, and he like made sure like, no, these guys got to pay these special assessments, or else our taxes would have been like $1,000 more a year. And so we have a sweet thing where we are on city and sewer, but all our outdoor spigots are on well. So we have a well, but we just don't. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's pretty unique.
Sure. That's nice though.
Yeah, I mean, there's some people that are, it's kind of weird. People are, that don't like fluoride in their water. They'll come to our house and fill up their jugs of water because they don't drink city water. It's kind of,
You mean like your neighbors?
yeah, not our neighbors, but like we have friends. I have weird friends.
I have weird friends. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. So are you guys, I'm guessing everything is on city and sewer.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
nice.
I had zero interest in well and septic. There's enough work in being a homeowner. I'd rather not
Yeah.
have to empty that out every few years. Well, there are a lot of differences between Wisconsin and Minnesota real estate.
Okay. What do you think
Yeah.
are the biggest?
When I have friends right now who want advice about Wisconsin real estate, I'm able to answer like the basic questions for them. But usually I just quickly give them off to somebody in Wisconsin because there are such huge differences and it's easy to forget what I've learned now and
Mhm.
am used to now, what it used to be like. The biggest thing that I've noticed is the appraisal contingency. It's just automatic in the Minnesota transaction in
Yeah.
the purchase agreement. It's just a contingency that you have. So in Wisconsin, you have the option of putting it in. So you
Oh,
could do a contract with zero appraisal contingency, which is crazy to me for anybody who has financing.
Wow.
Isn't
I
that weird?
Yeah, I couldn't imagine that'd be like. I mean, I suppose in a competitive situation.
It's weird. And then another thing is the inspection contingency is not set up the same as it is there. So when you have your inspection contingency in Wisconsin, it's not assumed that you can get out at any point before it's over for almost any reason. It has to be inspection related if you're
Yeah.
going to get out. And even then, they sometimes can still keep your earnest money.
Wow. So
So,
for those that don't know, what's nice for Minnesota at least. I mean, unfortunately, there's people that take advantage of this. But what's nice about in Minnesota is that we during the inspection, either you decide to pick, the inspection contingency will last 10, sometimes shorter than that, but 10, 15 days. That you can really, I mean, I've had people back out or, find something out pretty minor, but if it's something that isn't important to you, like one of them was they had no idea that the ductwork didn't reach a certain room and they were going to use that room as a studio. So it just didn't work out for their thing altogether. Don't get me wrong, the seller was very mad about that. And it was not a good thing for them to back out for something like that.
oh,
But
it's still not a great thing, but
yeah,
like
it's not a great thing that you can back out like that, but it's, you are protected. So it sounds like almost like I don't know, that's a pretty bold statement for me to say, but it sounds like the buyers might be a little bit more protected in Minnesota. Is that
yes,
okay?
that is bold and accurate.
Okay.
Yeah, it definitely feels that way. Um, so I'm curious about your market where you are. Do you have to get as competitive as we do? Because right now I have several buyers that they're losing out in 10 to 20 offer situations. There's so many on the table.
Um, that's a good question. I would say that we don't get 10 to 20. I'd say that we like get somewhere from 5 to 8. If it was like a right now, if you are, kind of middle, I don't know what middle class like would be considered like in the cities for the market. That's why I rely on people like you to help me with that, and hand my leads off because, and that's the thing too is for anybody, I think that if your real estate agent isn't in your market, I mean, I don't think it's a bad thing at all for them to hand them off to somebody that they trust because, so for example, I don't know what you'd be like middle class, but probably between like 150 to 250 to 280K is like our middle class.
Oh,
Like
sure.
if you put that on the market right now, you're, I mean, it's gonna, you could just hold a sign out there. You don't might as well not even put it in the
Oh,
ground.
yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
we also have no inventory up here. I don't know about you. Like, when I'm not even kidding. Like, if I were to show you our statistics of like our county right now, it'd probably be like alarming to you. Like, we're talking like maybe 1 to 2 new listings every 3 days. And so,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
so we have buyers lined up right now, and people. I don't know if it's COVID or what it is, but people are just with winter too, people just don't want to list their house. So
People can't get into houses.
what's that?
I said people can't even get into houses at that rate.
Right, right. So it's kind of a, so our market is, I would say it's not as competitive as yours at all, but it's definitely like a situation where if it's the right house, it can be. That being said, though, I mean, it's if people are afraid of those competitive situations, that it is a nice area where, right now it's, you could buy a house right now and it wouldn't be competitive. There isn't much on the market, but if you found the one that you did, it wouldn't be, you'd get a little bit more, it'd be a little bit easier to talk with just one-on-one rather than having 3 or 4 offers. So
Yeah, that reminds me a lot of the Wisconsin market, and I don't know if it's changed since I was there last year, but
mhm,
yeah, it was like you were in an offer situation with maybe 5 to 10 offers, and the average home sale price was 180.
mhm. And it
So it
really
was,
just yeah, it really just depends.
yeah.
Like if we have, I don't know if you're familiar, but we have like Lake Pokegama up here, and that a whole area will will just, I mean, if you get something if you price it right, and that's kind of where it's like up to the real estate agent too, is right now with the market and everything like that, like if it's priced right, it'll sell.
Oh, absolutely.
But how
Okay.
do you notice it? What about sellers in your area? Do you notice anything different about Wisconsin sellers versus Minnesota sellers? I don't know are they more protected here, more protected in Wisconsin?
No, I think everything is a little bit clearer here. It's all written out clearer in the contract for seller. Here's what we expect of you, buyer. Here's what we expect of you. And I mean that as far as the inspection contingency. Sellers here understand that buyers can get out based on the inspection contingency. And I don't know. I haven't seen a huge difference otherwise as far as sellers. Um, I think right now in this market, it's just crazy.
Mhm.
Sellers know how they can get, and they're not really willing to budge as far as covering closing costs, and they're usually receiving some form of additional provision in the contract stating that they're not going to be asked of anything from the inspection contingency, or that buyers are going to bring an extra $5,000 to closing if the appraisal doesn't come through. Right now is an ideal time to be a seller because buyers need to get into houses, and sellers, there's not very many of them right now.
Mhm.
It's
Hmm.
crazy.
What hmm. What about cost of living compared to Wisconsin? Like, I guess you would know that better than anybody. I mean, what's the cost of living from where you were at to the cities?
The biggest shock factor for me was the house market, just
Mhm.
because when we moved here, we were all right out the gate ready to buy a house because we were about to buy one in Wisconsin. So we were like, oh, let's see, 180 could get us this little ranch. It's a decent house. It's fairly updated. This is great in Wisconsin. And then we come here and we spoke with a really good friend of mine, Sierra, who's ended up selling us our house here. And she's like, you're gonna have to go higher than 180. You can't get much here for 180. You can get a little shack.
Yeah.
So we ended up having to go and get pre-approved, and not pre-approved. We officially got pre-approved. He's like, yeah, you can go up to this number, and we were able to get a beautiful house, but you had to go a little bit further out in the suburbs with that.
Yeah.
So the first time homebuyer price range here is pretty much a minimum of 200, 210, and first
Wow.
time home go up to 350, which in Wisconsin, 350 gets you like the area of Wisconsin I was in, it gets you a beautiful modern home that I remember having a client in the $300,000 price range there. And I was like, oh, these houses are amazing. I hope to live in one someday. And
Yeah.
now that's first time home buyers are price wise here. It was just a huge shock for me.
Wow. So our house we have a pretty small house. I mean, we bought it when I was 22 or 23. We were, probably been married for a year at that point. And then, we, we, like I said, we weren't even pre-approved or anything. It was a weird situation, but the realtor
Yeah.
worked with, he was great. Um, but we have a 2-bedroom house with everything. It wasn't like, modern, super modern where, the nice pulling drawers or, secret storage units. Like that's kind of the popular modern now, but everything was redone, remodeled and everything. And so it was good. And we have an acre of land.
Good for
Yeah,
you.
yeah, and it was 150K was our house. So I mean, yeah, just so that kind of gives you an idea of the market difference between up here versus down there.
It's just crazy.
Mhm. Yeah, it's hard. It's interesting. You have that I don't know if statistics would prove this or not, but maybe you can speak with this because it kind of sounds like the community you were in Wisconsin was kind of similar to what I have now, up in Grand Rapids, Minnesota. I live in an area that sounds pretty similar to where you are in Wisconsin.
Hmm.
It's interesting because people are always talking about how northern Minnesota, it's so much cheaper to live here and everything. And I live in the cities. Obviously, yeah, housing is so much more. I mean, it sounds like the house I have, you just compare. My brother-in-law lives down there, and he bought kind of a similar house with a lot less land, and he spent about 40, 50K more than I did. And but the thing is like there's different things that you kind of trade in everything. I mean, obviously, living in the cities, you have you can go get food anytime you want. There's way more entertainment, things like that. You have to make your own entertainment here. But also, I also think like there's so much. If I were to buy, 20 acres farm here or something like that, the amount of money that people invest in these things and put in these things and spend on, I really think there's not as much of a difference as people think there is, if that makes sense. I don't know if
Yeah.
that
No.
makes sense to you, but maybe just a rant of mine. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's definitely give and take. Like here in Plymouth, Minnesota, have you ever been?
Yeah, I've been in the area.
So Plymouth is, for those of you who don't know, is directly west of Minneapolis, and it is a beautiful area. The houses are stunning. You have large neighborhoods of between 900,000 and $3 million homes. They're just beautiful. And then you don't get any acreage. The house takes up
Hmm.
pretty much all the acreage. You for a lot of these houses. That obviously isn't for every single one, but you can reach out and hand your neighbor a cup of sugar through the window. It's just crazy, but people want to be there because first of all, they're right next to all the action. They
Yeah.
have amazing school districts. The Wayzata School District is very well known,
Yes.
and their houses are just stunning. It's a great area to be in. And people are like, oh, I don't care about the land. But then in Wisconsin, if I would have told people that you're not going to get any acres, they've been like, why would anybody want that? It's just a whole different way of life. I had so
That's
many
so
people,
true.
would you never want any acreage? Blah, blah, blah. But the people in Plymouth are like, that's how we live. That's what we want, you
Yeah.
know?
There's people here, I laugh about it because, well, we live in a neighborhood, but still we'll go for a walk in the house around the neighborhood with our dog, and we'll look at some of the garages and the land and everything. I'm like, this is the only place I think probably in the state where people will spend more money on their garage than they will on their house. It's, it's insane.
It's incredible.
Yeah. How's your husband? Because your husband's from Iowa originally, because you guys been in high school?
Yeah. Yep, he has always lived in Iowa. He was one when they moved to their house that they're still living in.
Hmm.
So every time we go home, it's like we stay in his childhood bedroom. It's so much fun. Meanwhile, my parents have owned 11 houses since they've been married.
Yeah. Have you
Um,
ever driven by the old Rochester one?
oh my God. So we had a wedding. Did you ever know Taylor Niesel
That sounds
and
familiar.
Niesel? So Brian got married shortly after we did. I think it was 2018.
Yeah, that sounds really familiar. I don't.
We went to Rochester for his wedding, and we went to the Hy-Vee, of course, because that's such a huge thing in my just tattoo Hy-Vee across my forehead. But we went and drove by like what was it, Harriet Bishop Elementary,
Yeah.
which I remember being like a mile away walking there to school. It is like 20 feet.
Yeah, it's bad.
And I went to the house and I couldn't believe how tiny it was because when I was 5 years old, I was like, this mansion, and hats off to my mom for running a daycare of how many was it, 8 kids with one bathroom. And
Yeah.
it was such a fun little area though.
There
It's like,
was
oh,
there was a girl, I'll tell you afterwards who the person is, but there was a girl that went to our daycare, and I went to high school with her and grew up like we didn't really have any classes or anything like that, but I had no idea she was. And then all of a sudden, I think your mom tagged us on like an old cute picture on Facebook or something, and all of a sudden I was like, I had no idea you were the one that I was. It wasn't my sister. But.
that's yeah, that was, I couldn't believe how much our memories deceive us
Yeah,
after all those years.
gosh, that was fun. Wait, how did you guys end up being a Chiefs fans? I never understood that.
We didn't become Chiefs. Bryce has been a Chiefs fan his whole life, so I gotta give him that because his parents are from Kansas. But
Yeah.
us Richardsons didn't become Chiefs fans until we moved to Olathe, which was right outside of Kansas City, and my dad would get all sorts of like free Chiefs tickets.
Okay.
And I personally would go to the games so I could get the cotton candy. I couldn't give a flying fart about football, but after a while, we really, really, really became big Chiefs fans, and that never really faded. It was just
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
then when you move to Iowa, you don't have an NFL team, so you pick
Right.
from the bunch. It's a la carte. So we chose the Chiefs.
Does your mom still work at Ivy?
Yeah. Yep.
They really just they just bleed Ivy.
They bleed it. It was literally stitched onto my baby blanket, Malcolm.
Was it
That's
really?
not even a joke. That's not a joke.
Yeah. Did you have you ever gone back to the Rochester one?
Hmm.
It's
Yeah,
totally
we
different
went. Yeah, with the like market grill, and I can't even wrap my head around it because like my dad painted the outside of that store, and I just like it's crazy how much time flies.
now. Yeah, we when I was so they had that when I was in high school. Went to John Marshall over there, and we had I don't know, some sort of, we weren't, you can only leave campus if you're a senior, and I think I was a sophomore and junior in college. I
Oh,
was
really?
in high school. Yeah. But we could, cause it was like a testing day or something like that. And I don't know, I played football in high school, and I was a pretty big dude then. I was probably like, 50 pounds heavier than I am now as an offensive lineman. And so we, me like the offensive line, there's this thing called like the Grand Buffet you can buy there. And I don't know if you've seen it, but they have like Italian food, Chinese, like it's just all like this marketplace. And like me and the guys there, I don't know, somebody was there that said, we don't care how much you take. You can even take some home. So we're like, okay. So while we were there, it wasn't like we would pick out stuff. It was like we want from this side of the menu of your shelf of food. We went from this side to here, just pile it on a plate. And our entire offensive line cleaned up the whole plate. It was nuts.
I'm sure. I
Yeah,
don't even know if it was enough.
probably not. It was rough. And then it was yeah, then we like brought like meatballs with and like eating those during a test. It was bad. Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yep. That's how. Oh man, yeah. Yeah, it's funny to think about. Like we visited you. I don't know if you remember this, but we visited you in Kansas City.
I think so. Were there any like big things we did while you were there? Would it be like go to?
I I don't know if you went with maybe you and my sister and your mom did something different, but we went to a Kansas City Royals game.
Yeah, we didn't go, but I remember this.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. God, my
I,
memory fails me though.
yeah. Well, I mean, I'm used to going to Twins games, and that was before the new stadium was built. So there was the Metrodome, and so I was like watching baseball outside. It's incredible.
That's so cool. So I was gonna ask you, how is it to balance new baby, which it's overwhelming, I know. How is it to balance baby and real estate? I know it's a lot easier with it being a flexible job, but I'm curious, what are you guys gonna do as far as are one of you gonna stay home or daycare or what?
Yeah. So with that, we're with real estate in general, and there might be people that have more boundaries, and I'm still young. I'm 26 years old, and so I'm still working on getting established and everything like that. So I recognize that I have to do some things that somebody that's been doing it for 20 years doesn't get to. Some of those guys may have the option where they can sleep at night by just turning their phone off at 5 o'clock, and I don't have the luxury of that. I've
Yeah.
kind of what I've done is I've kind of put a little bit of a boundary there where I'm going to um, I try to text more at night, and everything. I don't know how real estate agents did it before technology,
Oh my God, I think about that all the time.
like GPS and everything. I mean, I'm honestly thinking about just like recording. There's some of the places I go to and everything in the middle of nowhere with like no service. Sometimes I have no service and I get like terrified because I'm at this like lake house and it's probably haunted. I don't know, but
Probably a couple murderers hanging out.
yeah, yeah. So it's like, I mean, and yeah, don't get me wrong. And it's always like sometimes it is like something that me and my wife have to kind of reassess every once in a while about boundaries and everything with people. But no, I mean, like it kind of comes with the job. And um, when I first started real estate and I wasn't getting paid or anything like that for it, it was always like, what are you doing? And then you start bringing home money, and then it's like, oh,
You're like, oh, that's why.
yeah, yeah. So it's give and take. I mean, it's also too is there's some clients that'll cross boundaries, but a lot of people, like what's nice too, and I think that it depends on your personality. What I appreciate being in a small town is that I really feel as if I have a relationship with these people. A lot of people that have moved up, like we just had a couple that moved up from Iowa that found me online, and they are members of our church, and now they were one of the people that brought food for us when our baby was born. So I mean, it's
Wow.
yeah. So I mean, like it's that's the beauty of a small town is like I still maintain relationships with a lot of these people, and that's kind of and that's that's I also
Yeah.
think like you're under a microscope a little bit more. I think about that sometimes. Like last night, I I hit the ground running yesterday with paperwork and computer stuff that I never left the house. And so I think I worked out at the Y, so I had my workout clothes still on, and then I had to run to Walmart quick. And I realized I'm like, oh, I'm out in public in a small town, and my hair is all over the place. I smell terrible, and I'm wearing sweatpants, and so
Yeah.
and like luckily we were masks because it was yeah it
You
was
don't know me. Yep.
yeah.
I feel
So
like that too, for sure. And honestly, that is one of the cliche parts about the business is, oh, everybody's my best friend. I love everyone that I help. I love helping people. But like, you do. We love helping people because you're making these lifelong relationships. That's the beauty of it, you know? And then
yeah.
there's those negative people that are like, oh, people suck. But like, that's not the mindset that's going to get you far because you
Mhm.
can't open your heart to people that way,
Yeah,
you
and
know?
I think too, those you're going to have those rough transactions and those rough times with people, but it's just kind of like life. You just kind of work through it, and um, you work through it, and you just kind of keep going. I mean, it's incredible too. I mean, what I think one situation that was kind of kind of like a humbling experience for me is these people were really rude to me the whole time, and I
Mm.
lost. I had to kind of like, there was a couple things too. I mean, it was one of my very first transactions, and there was a couple things that I could have done differently and everything, of course. And I could just remember the frustration with that they had with me, I had with them, and things back and forth. And sure enough, like I found out, I didn't know if I was going to eventually say something like, you were kind of rude, and that was just me being naive to it, and I would never do that now. But it turns out that their daughter had passed away, so it really kind of like was clear to me that it was like you don't know what people are going through, and we're just kind of there to help them with this thing, and to remember like that we have to give the best service possible because that's our job, and we're meant
Can't imagine.
to help. Yeah, it's nice to hopefully be a bright spot and kind of be with them as they go through an exciting time.
That's a really good reminder. And it is okay to fire people. I have done it,
Yeah.
you know. Like we have zero reason to be in that toxic situation. Like we got to respect ourselves enough to just let it go. There will be people that match our business that like us. Like we enjoy selling to people we like. They enjoy buying from people that they like and trust, you
Yeah,
know.
absolutely.
It's not worth it. But like in a situation like that, that's so hard because yeah, you have to put yourself in their shoes. I can't imagine. I would have been horrible to you too if I just lost my daughter, you
Yeah,
know?
it's just, yeah, it's incredible. No, that's good. I think that's the thing that I think that every like real estate agent has to go through and just experience is like figuring out those boundaries of
Mhm.
what of what to do.
Absolutely.
And yeah, it's just tough. But well, thank you so much for spending time with me. I really appreciate you doing this, and I hope that your son isn't screaming for you or anything like that.
I'm gonna let him sleep another 2 hours if he chooses to. This is nice.
Okay, I'll stop the recording now, and then I'll tell you who I went through high school with. Okay.
Yes.
All right.